So I'll just start out showing you the sphere. Well, one thing I want to mention is just because your white handout has this gray area shaded in about around the side of the cylinder and on the cube, it's just to show you, it's just because your paper is white. So if they didn't shade in that background, you wouldn't see those edges because the paper is white. So your paper that you're drawing on is gray, and so you don't need to put that in there. Students always ask me that, and I guarantee you somebody who's not listening right now will come up and ask me that today. So if I'm just doing the sphere, I'm going to start, you're going to do all four. It doesn't matter which one you start with. You just have to do all four. I'm going to start with that sort of balancing line. I'm going to start with my middle oval as wide as I want it to be, making sure it's even. Okay, so you draw through first. You make sure it's sketchy. Like, don't think you have to have it perfect your first mark on your page. So, trust me. And then I would even sketch in the shape of the shadow as well. Look at where the shadow lines up with what you already have drawn. I don't need to draw the shadow down here. It goes out to the right. It almost goes exactly straight out to the right. So pay attention to how it lines up with what you have drawn. And then it even tells you where the light is coming from. And I start this out the exact same way that I do the value scales. I look for the extreme values first. So I'm going to look for that highlight and get that in first with just the white. Then I'm going to look for my core shadow over on this side with just the black. And it is going to get relatively blurry before it starts to get, good, before it starts to look like it's done well. And that's something you're going to have to get used to. It's a very frustrating part of this drawing, but it's a very necessary part of this drawing. Working with chalk, it gets messy. It gets blurry and messy, and the very last part is getting clear details. So it is kind of frustrating at first because it really doesn't look done until you are almost done. It doesn't really look crisp or clean or anything till the end. And then I'm going to start, so once I have those two extremes, I'm going to start looking for those middle grays. And again, you can use the side of your chalk. With the sphere, be really careful. And if you notice, I went right over that vine charcoal because it's light enough. I don't need to erase it. It doesn't matter. Be really careful when you're doing the sphere because you want to make sure that you don't get this football shape in the values. A lot of times kids just go like this. If it starts to look like that, like you have corners, that's not what we're going for. I'll zoom in. All right? It should follow the same contour as that sphere. That shadow has to wrap around. It doesn't just stop at it. There should be no points. There shouldn't be no hard pointed edges at all. But see, it's getting really blurry, and that's all right. I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to get in some of these middle grays. And I still haven't used my finger yet. Notice that. You don't need to use your finger to blend. It's the last thing you're going to do. You don't have to rely on your finger at all. And if mine looks this messy right now, it's okay for yours to look messy at some point. And the more, remember, use your finger absolutely last because you can already see it starting to blend itself without me even needing to do that. I'm just going to get some of that darker shadow in. And then when you have it nice and thick like this, then you can kind of smooth it out, but be very careful. Again, follow the same contour as the shape or the form that you're drawing. If I was going like this, then I would leave lines. My finger would leave straight lines going through it, and it would make it look flat again instead of 3D. So be really cautious of that as you go. And then the very last thing, it's still really fuzzy around the edges. Oops. So the very last thing I'm going to do is use those charcoal pencils to refine those edges a little bit. But here's where you have to be careful. And this is the number one thing that you will lose points on your actual still life drawing. if all I do, like I see that this is darker right here, the edge gradually gets to that darker black value, but just leaving a line there, that's not a gradual change, that's a really abrupt change. That's just a line, that's an outline, and that's what you would lose points for. So I might start with that with my pencil, but I'm gonna make sure that I kind of blur that in so that it looks like it gradually changes to that black. I don't want to have a hard edge, and that's it. You should never have any outlines when you're done. So be careful when you're using these pencils for the edges. When I say refine the edges, I don't mean put an outline. I mean use the edges, use the pencils to create a crisp edge without showing any outlines. And this is what I'm saying you need to do. So you can use these, and this is why you want to save them for the last step too, because they are just for the edges. It's just for crisping that up a little bit. And again, if you can't do it on this part, this is as simple as it's going to get. It's only going to get harder, significantly harder. So if you're having a hard time with this, you need to slow down and get this part right before you move on. Or else it's just not going to help you, which maybe you're okay with, but it'll definitely reflect on your work too. So as long as you have a nice smooth change to that dark value, then you're fine. I still probably want to blur that just a little bit more. So it takes quite a bit to get it where you want it. And that highlight, you might finish with your whitest value again, because it does tend to get a little muddy and kind of get lost. It is easy for it to kind of get dirty. What's that? Okay, but remember that I do this like 18 times a year, so, and I already went to college for it and all that stuff, so don't be too intimidated by your teacher. It's fine. You can do this. Thanks, though. All right, so that's just that. That's just the sphere. And if it took me, I mean, let's see, it took me 7 minutes to do that. It'll take you at least that long. So take